Welcome to a football show Monday edition. Moral Victory Monday, I believe, is what we're going to call it here on the show. Brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. That is Paul Kuharsky. I am Braden Gall. Paul, how are you, sir?
I'm well. I'm not a fan of this team, and I'm not a fan of moral victories. But if I were a fan of this team, I think that's not a bad football game. 13 points bugs me a lot. But I felt like they were competitive longer and better with maybe the best football team they've gone against.
Ooh.
I don't know. I think there were some things to take from that game, though it's very easy to excise some of them.
Well, I want to figure out what exactly you're taking from that game. I want to talk about that. I've got a question for you at the end of the show that I told you I was going to ask, but I did not tell you what it is.
Secret
question later on in the episode at the very end. And it kind of is going to tie into some of the progress that we've seen from Will Levis. And what does that mean for the future? It's going to tie into the atmosphere that I sort of observed at Nissan Stadium on Sunday. There's lots of takes flying around about fans and about all this other stuff, but I think there was sort of a general observation I had that I wanted to run by you. We'll look at the referees again. I think we talked about this last week on the show, but we've got to get into it again because there were 13 penalties for 91 yards and some questionable calls, and Brian Callahan losing his cool on the sideline, maybe justifiably so, but it certainly was a huge play in the game, and certainly the end of the Chargers game last weekend was also a huge play of the game. So, look, the tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists versus undisciplined football versus refs being bad kind of could all be true, but we'll get to that a little bit later on as well. Again, Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, two great local companies in Nashville. Go support good local businesses. We'll tell you a little bit more about your Thanksgiving coming up next week, as we've told you on the show a number of times. But we'll discuss that a little bit later on. I want to start with look, it's a 23-13 loss. They are 2-8. There are, to your point, things that we can pull out and that we can be positive about. And if you want to get into the comments and jump and comment about any of this stuff, please do so. I already see Ed and Cody and Redemption in the comments as well. We'll get to all you guys today on the show. Make sure you're following Paul on paulkuharsky.com, of course. $7.50, not a lot of money there for good Titans coverage. So make sure you go check that out.
You're almost going to give me good Preds coverage, which I definitely do not provide.
No, you do not. Lowerbroadhockey.com, by the way, if you want to do that. Myself, Adam, and Emma come over and hang out. Also brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. So all good stuff there. Okay, so Ed says, Brandon, I believe you are too far back and must be called for a legal procedure. Is that me or Braden? There we go. I'm too far back. There you go. No, appreciate you guys for jumping in.
You could call him Brandon. I approve of that.
It's fine. I've been called much, much worse. I was branded in my high school stadium at Franklin High School. I would score a touchdown and I would hear, I wouldn't hear it, but my mother, who's in the stands, would hear, on the touchdown reception, Brandon Gall, and she would be furious.
How many touchdown receptions did you have?
My senior year, 6.
Really?
Yeah, led the team.
Wow.
Yep. I was, I'm not going to go full Al Bundy on you here, but I was the 5A Middle Tennessee wide receiver of the year. How about that?
I'm stunned.
What?
I'm stunned.
No, you're not. Come on.
You don't strike me as a particularly high school athletic guy.
I am.
You as more of a philosopher.
I am genuinely offended by this.
As I'm intending for you to be.
But that was also kind of complimentary to my my mental acumen as well. So, I don't know if I should be offended or defend you. I don't actually know. But no, I was honor society. I was in the math club and an all-region football player. So there you go.
Could you have played somewhere low ranking based on your size?
I had offers for Tennessee Tech and Wash U in St. Louis.
St. Louis? My school fed a lot of people to Wash U in St. Louis.
Incredibly good academic school, but when I heard they were called the Fighting Engineers, I thought, I don't think this is for me.
Well, we know you're no engineer. Yeah. That I think we could all agree on.
Ironically, what I started at Middle Tennessee for was aerospace engineering, and then was going to go to Virginia Tech. Yeah, you have no idea about me.
I'm missing. Yeah, I don't even know you anymore.
You know. All right, so here's my observation, my very unintellectual and but very athletic observation about the game. So I've certainly not been to as many games as you have at Nissan Stadium, but I've been to a lot, and I felt this pregame. I felt this driving in. Actually, Saturday, I had a couple of lunch meetings, and then my wife and I had some dinner Saturday evening. Vikings, purple people everywhere, just everywhere, literally at both restaurants we were at, like everything. I was at Shotgun Willie's Barbecue on Friday, taking a lunch meeting and a work meeting with a friend. Purple everywhere. It was just purple everywhere, which is not a new thing. It's not new. Driving into a 2-7 football team with very little traffic at like 10:45, 11 o'clock, not all that new or crazy. But I got an energy that I felt was a little different, and I wanted to see what you thought about this. I felt like even the people in the press box, including Titans employees, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, but the fans on both sides, Minnesota and the Titans, the game itself felt this way to me. Everything about it felt just real chill. Like it felt like I was at a baseball game, which my wife really enjoys because they're kind of relaxing. They're more social events than they are like stand up, sit down, be loud, be quiet. You have a job to do at football games normally. Soccer games are that way as well. Kind of a chill, relaxing, kind of just sing along and kind of observe the motion that's going on out there. And I felt that way most of the day. The Titans personnel in the press box down where I sit, not where you sit, Paul, is a lot of folks that work on like game day operations and some of the production that's not really like pertinent to the game day stuff. And everyone was just kind of like, having fun, relaxed, telling jokes. I didn't think the press box was all that heavy with like intensity. I didn't think the game was heavy with intensity. I didn't think the fan bases were carrying a lot of emotion and intensity into it. It felt very just like, oh, there's some competition going on here. I don't know about you, but that's how I took it. And I don't think there's a huge takeaway from all of this, but it felt almost too relaxed for an NFL football game, if that makes sense.
I didn't get any of that sense. I was kind of surprised when you sent me that. I mean, I think if there was any of that sense, it would come from a kind of a foregone conclusion. I don't pick games really. I don't pick Titans games generally unless I have a strong feeling. And I was a double the spread guy at this game, and it was 5.5, so I would have lost. But I didn't think the Titans had a very good chance if I think they're going to spring an upset still at some point, but I didn't think it had a chance of being in this game. I didn't think it was a good matchup game for them with all the mix and match fronts and the Titans offensive line difficulties, particularly on the right side. Those came to fruition to a large degree. To be honest, I wouldn't have thought it would have been a 10-point game if you told me what the Titans were going to manage to do on the ground, which was absolute zero. So maybe there was some of that. I think it was an all-time takeover game, and we see takeover games all the time. The Packers game, you were in the crowd and saw that for yourself from that side of things. You were in the press box on this one. I didn't see you.
Yeah. I'm down by loud press box guy.
Yeah, I don't venture down by loud press box guy because of him being loud press box guy. No, I should have wandered down there because I knew you were there because I delivered you a parking pass.
You did.
But the takeover degree was remarkable. I think legitimately 70%, and I'm not a good estimator, but I feel comfortable with that number. And I feel comfortable with people's disgust with that number. And I don't think there's really anything the Titans could do about it. And we've talked about this, in off seasons and seasons and everything. And I don't know how much it changes after the new stadium smell wears off, unless they're playing winning football. But it's interesting to me that you felt that way. That's distinctive to you.
I guess what it is, Paul, and the NFL is such an ultra gladiator competitive energy and vibe most of the time, and it's sort of different than a lot of other sports in that sense, especially in the regular season. Everything is so important and palpable, in my opinion. College football is that way too, and it's just a football thing, I think. And it felt like there was I could feel the fact that the stakes were lower is what it felt like to me. And that's because they were, and I think it's, to your point, absolutely part of the Vikings having so many fans. I think that's the fewer the home fans you have in a building, it's just that's going to happen naturally. The energy is going to be different. It's going to, like, the more you go 50-50, the harder it is to get a true feeling about the crowd or the direction of the game or whatever. And I don't know. I felt it from the second I walked. I just felt like everyone was like more relaxed. The press was more relaxed. I heard from this. I don't want to go all the way to this, but there's lots of tongue-in-cheek jokes about like, oh, how bad this game is going to be to watch. You know what I mean? Like, and report on and cover. And that's something I'm not trying to call anybody out on that, but like, that's just something that happens when you're 2-7 and you're mid-November and you're, a heavy underdog at home with a bunch of Vikings people in the crowd.
It's kind of funny because I eat breakfast traditionally before the game, shortly after 10:30, when inactives come out, with John Glennon, always with David Beauclair, who wasn't there and used to be with Joe Rexrod, who's no longer around. And I said to John, so it was Johnny and I said, I'm fired up to have a game.
Just what
as bad as it is, we get at least revised storylines, even if they're the same thing, and kind of fresh paint. And I'm ready for some fresh paint. I didn't have the best week last week, and so give me some fresh paint. And that was where our pregame conversation, which isn't all about football by any means, started. So I was fresh paint guy on Sunday.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Just an energy I picked up on and wanted to see what you thought about, and I think it absolutely ties into the Vikings fans. I agree. One of the largest road contingents I've seen, and I imagine won't be the last one this season, with teams like the Bengals coming to town. So there's going to be some.
K-Dot wants you to name loud press box guy.
I don't have his name, actually.
I think most people have no idea who it is. There's another guy that showed up just before NWI's 98-yard touchdown reception and left shortly thereafter. There's some characters down there.
So my assumption is, and look, he's a perfectly fine guy. He just talks a lot in the press box and is clearly rooting for the team. And he popped in right before, and this might be the same guy, right before NWI scored the touchdown. And my theory, it's not scientific, is as soon as he sat down, they scored. They completed the second longest. I guess it's the tied for the longest pass play in franchise history. It's the longest play from scrimmage in the NFL this year. The last one, I believe, was 1962, according to the Titans PR. And he sat down and immediately long touchdown pass to NWI. Coincidence? Science? I don't know, Paul. You tell me.
Yeah, I'm not a superstition guy at all. I'm very grateful for my seat away from such riffraff.
I will say, at one point, and there was a contingent of, let's call them radio/TV people that were awfully loud in the second half. Many of whom would like to find out who Loud Press Box Guy is, ironically.
I think you guys should investigate. It's not very difficult to find out who it is. And I think we'd all like to know. I'm grateful that Loud Press Box Guy usually leaves early and is not in press conferences post-game or locker room.
No, my guess is some sort of game day photographer. My guess is out in
taking photos from the press box.
No, he's out. He's not here all game. He's not there all game, but he sits in the same place. I think he comes up afterward. Maybe he's a halftime photographer. I don't know, but he always has a camera with him. Never uses it in the press box. We'll
I don't
see.
know if there's such a thing as a halftime.
It's national.
That's quite neat.
National anthem photographer guy. just photographs the national anthem. It's interesting. It's interesting because he wears a lanyard. He's got a name on his lanyard, so you think it'd be easy, but you don't want to engage. You don't want to. You don't want to engage.
Lean in lanyard looker sometimes.
Yeah, you don't want to. Yeah, you kind of have to do it looking the other way. And then you're kind of peeking down.
Drop your pen.
Look, anything to not engage is my goal on this. I actually sat on the other side of JT just for that. I knew that when I got there. I was like, I'm going to sit on your left this time. Okay. Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Thanksgiving is next week, Paul. And if you would like to have all of your Thanksgiving taken care of, Sinkers Beverages. Right here, I got the shirt, I got the swag.
When you say next week, do you mean this week or the week after this week?
It's next week.
I'm getting a little concerned.
It's not this week, right?
That it's sooner than I think.
No, it's next week. It's next Thursday. You and I will do this show.
A week from Thursday.
It's next week. I don't think that needs to be explained. There's this week, and then there's next week.
Confused. Listen, I'm broadcasting from here because I came here for an event today. I left my bag here, which I didn't need to bring at all. There was no reason for me to bring my bag. I had 2 cards in the bag to take out to give to someone, which I did. Then I left my bag here. Then I went out to lunch. Then I drove home. And then I got home. I went to set up the podcast. I looked in the back of my car to get my bag. And I was like, oh, bleep, no bag. Turned around and came back here. So today,
I thought you had some
I'm having a lot of trouble keeping track of things lately. It's a real down.
You need a fresh coat of paint is what you need.
My wife is going to, she said, I thought you were podcasting. I said, I'm leaving again. She said, I thought you were podcasting. I said, the computer with which I podcast is in Berry Hill. She said, oh.
Well, I thought you had some like super important meeting or something. You know, you're hobnobbing with important folks. And then sure enough.
I hobnobbed earlier.
Sure enough. You just are an old man.
Yeah.
who left his bag somewhere. Okay. All right. Thanksgiving is in fact next week, despite conflicting reports, but Thanksgiving is in fact next week. And if you would like to go to the website right now for Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, that's sgwbbq.com. You can click on the Thanksgiving button right there, and you can order all the food you want. There's smoked brisket, smoked turkey, a bunch of sides, great jalapeno cornbread, which is exquisite. They got pumpkin pie too if you need it. And you can hit the button. You can put your order in. You'll go pick it up by 2:00 next Wednesday. There'll be full instructions on how to reheat it because it'll be smoked and cooked for you before that morning, like Wednesday morning. And he'll take care of you guys. And then you pop by Sinker's Beverages. They've got all the wines you would want to pair with that meal. And if you don't like wine, like I don't drink a lot of wine, go into the award-winning Nashville's best craft beer retail beer fridge. All kinds of good craft beer in there. East Nashville Beer Works, Bearded Irish, Jackalope, Yazoo, Tennessee Brew Works, you name it. Really good local beer in there. So support good local companies that are doing good local work. That's Shotgun Willie's Barbecue and Sinker's Beverages for your Thanksgiving needs. Go sign up, folks. I'm telling you, take the stress out of the cooking process for Thanksgiving. So there you go. All right, let's get into the referees here then, Paul, because 13 penalties, 91 yards, I think it was 3 penalties or 4 penalties for the Vikings, not a lot. 3 of those were on the right tackle, Prince, who's not played a lot of snaps for this team. 3 illegal formation plays, including one that called back a very long and important touchdown pass to Calvin Ridley. Brownlee was flagged a couple of times. You had a couple of late hit calls, I believe, on a few linebackers. Kenneth Murray. Obviously, the Mike Brown unnecessary roughness targeting call in the end zone was a huge play that changed the game. How much, because I think there's multiple conversations here. I think there is an important conversation that to acknowledge Titans fans' feelings about all of this stuff, which sometimes feelings aren't the best way to do journalism, but they're feeling a certain way about this. And it's okay to say that we think the NFL referees could be better, that they could be more transparent and accountable for their mistakes, and that in general, and Tennessee Vols fans, furious about their refs on Saturday night. They didn't lose the game because of that. I don't think the Titans lost the game because of the referees. But on the heels of the call against the Chargers and all the calls yesterday, I think it's okay to say, look, I would like more from the NFL referees without taking it all the way to the point of, like we said last week, that this is some sort of intentional conspiracy against the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, I mean, I think officiating in the NFL is not great. It's inconsistent. I think we all know that, and you can watch plenty of games around the league to figure that out. You don't need to settle on the Titans channel or be in the Titans region or the region of the Titans opponent and see their game to determine that. I think the call against Mike Brown in the end zone was just wrong. He didn't launch. You have to leave your feet or a foot to launch. I've watched the replay numerous times. He doesn't leave his feet. And then Cleet Blakeman makes it clear in his pool report with Nick Suss that they were saying that he launched. So he didn't meet the definition of launching there. The Titans are, they don't have to agree to a pool report, but usually when we ask for a pool report, they say, this is going to be fruitless, you guys know. And I said, yeah, I know it's going to be fruitless, but what they generally do is they put their foot in their mouth, and it helps us get a better assessment of how clueless they are. And lo and behold, that is kind of what happened with his comments. I mean, if you look at something like Isaiah Prince being in a legal formation 3 times, Blake Bedingfield looked at those at my site and said, on the one that undid Ridley, if he's in a legal formation, Prince, well, so is Radens and Latham. Well, I would look at it and say, Yes, I think all three of them are in a illegal formation. And if, as J.C. Latham says, he was warned on the very first offensive play of the Titans to scooch back, and everybody gets a warning, then Isaiah Prince would have gotten a warning. Whether you think you are in a legal formation or not, the officials are making it clear that they're going to be calling it tighter than you're used to or tighter than you like. Scooch your ass up. I understand in Prince's situation, you feel like you need to be further back because you cannot keep up with the speed of the people that are coming at you. But you've got to be up there. The rule's very clear. Your helmet has to break the belt of the center. And in the example that Blake was talking about, all three of the guys weren't in position where. So I don't think that forgives Prince. I think that also guiltifies, if you will, Braden and Latham. Get it right. And I'm disappointed that, Brian Callahan said today, we haven't been called for it all year. Well, that's fine. This crew was looking at it and calling it in a different way. Once it's called once, you have to say, today's a different day, boys. They're calling it tighter. Move up, period.
You'll appreciate this. It's like in the first inning, if a pitcher is getting the strike, 2 balls off the plate, it may be wrong, but you're going to have to open up your strike zone a little bit, or vice versa. Right. He's calling a strikes. He's calling a tight zone, and the ball on the black is not getting that strike call for the pitcher. As a pitcher, you got to be more accurate that day because the ump is calling it a certain way. What we ask for out of that umpire is to be consistent for 9 innings. If you're going to call it 2 balls off the plate, call it 2 balls off the plate the whole day so that we all know what's coming. And I think when you tell a team, hey, you're not doing X, at that moment, it does not matter what you think as the coach or the player. It doesn't matter. So I've seen I have guys sending me screen grabs of like the play against Ridley, and they're like, look, this is not a call. And I'm like, actually, it looks like, I agree with you. It looks like Latham is just as far off the line, if not further, in which case, if they have warned both players at some point during the game, and you've called a penalty twice on one of them, why are you risking it? Move up. It is not it. We can debate the merits of it, but they have told you they were going to call it. They told you what they were going to do. So it's unfortunate that it happened on a beautifully designed, well-executed play. Like that's the shit of it right there. Like I get that. But at the end of the day, if they tell you what's going on, because I want to work through all these calls, because I think like the Brownlee stuff, like it looked like PI to me on the one down the sideline with Jefferson, where at first it looked like Jefferson didn't turn for the ball, but then he clearly did turn for the ball. And you could tell me, if you want to tell me it was a 50-50 call where things are subjective and sometimes you get that call and sometimes you don't, I would say fine. But that is part of the game. And frankly, Brownlee has not put a lot of stuff on tape. Like he's shown a lot of handsiness in his first season, which is expected for a rookie player, and especially in a defense that's going to play roll-up man coverage. It's going to happen. You're going to get called for it. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes this is the same thing.
Benningfield wrote, cornerbacks get reputations, young cornerbacks.
Yeah.
Brownlee's got a reputation right now of being handsy. He's got to prove that he cannot be handsy, or he's going to draw flags more often than not in those situations. And that's the way the league works. Yeah. You can call that corrupt officiating, or you can call that kind of establishing precedent.
And again, the one thing I would argue is valid from Titans fans is like, if Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or these guys take hits, we know the stars get a little bit more, they get a little treatment, right? Like Michael Jordan got calls that, 12th man on the bench didn't get. And sometimes that's unfair, and sometimes it's just human nature. And none of the Titans right now are in that ballpark. None of the Titans are in the place where they get the benefit of the doubt. And that just is what it is. There's nothing you can do about that. I want to go to the Brown hit, though, because I think the Brown hit, frankly, is like the microcosm that the Justin Herbert fumble was as well, which is, if you were to tell me letter of the law, did he lift his foot and launch? Did he make head-to-head contact? The answer is no. It's not a penalty. If you're asking me why the rule is in place, which is to protect defenseless receivers from unnecessarily violent hits, even if it's like it clearly was shoulder to chest, like that part is definitely true. But he definitely is down low and like pushes up into him when he's completely defenseless, and it's real fast, it's real physical, and sometimes it looks like it was a penalty. Was it an unfortunate bad luck call? Was it a bad call? That stuff could all be true, but it's part of the game and it sucks. But it's part of the game, and you have to be a more disciplined football team to overcome those things.
Also, to presume that everything goes exactly the same way from there, and that it, lost the Titans the game because, that was 7 points and they 3 points, there were 3 points worth of penalty stuff somewhere else. It's just erroneous, how the Titans respond if they get that stop and how the Vikings respond if they're stopped there. We don't know. No, I don't know. I know that's not comforting. But I think the Vikings are significantly better than the Titans, and I think ultimately the result comes out the same. Maybe it's not 10 points. It's probably not 10 points.
I mean,
the Titans scored 13 points. Are they going to win the game with 13 points? No. Does that, as I'm saying, it's not predetermined what happens from there. But out of that stop, do they somehow get momentum that helps them score more than 13 points?
They could not get a first. They couldn't get a first down in like 3 straight drives. They couldn't get a first down. Immediately following that. And so, again, we can have a conversation about how NFL officials need to be better and more transparent and accountable. I think that's a valid and smart, intelligent conversation. We can have a discussion about how, man, they might have missed that one against Herbert. They might have missed that one against Brown. I could also argue that they got it right both times. I don't even necessarily agree with that, but I could argue that. In which case, it's a 50-50 call that sometimes you get and sometimes you don't get. But did either of those two calls the last 2 weeks cost the Tennessee Titans a win on the field? And it's hard to make a case that's ever the case with officiating, bad or good.
And I would still maintain in the universe it evens out. Now, is that universe the last 2 weeks? No. Is that universe going to be this season? Probably not. Is that universe going to be, the next 3 seasons? Whatever the universe is, over the course of time, it will, in fact, even out. Titans will get good at some point, and they'll have 4 good years, and they'll get all the calls in those 4 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And people I said this yesterday on the podcast after the game. A lot of people saying that, well, the league wants the Vikings to win because the Vikings are good and the Vikings are a playoff team. Well, I said, well, there are 3 very good playoff teams in the NFC North, the Vikings, the Packers, and the Lions. So what's the league's order of preference among those 3 NFC North teams? I asked people in the podcast to stack it up for me. Like, in what order do they want those teams to win? What are they telling the officials? Because the league clearly then, following this logic that they like the Vikings, well, then tell me about how they like the Packers and tell me about how they like the Lions. And what are they telling the officiating crews about how they want those games called and how they want the standings to come out in favor or not favor of those 3 teams that they, according to you, like all.
Yeah. The NFL does not care about any team, good or bad. It cares about the integrity of the outcomes, because as long as the outcomes cannot be questioned, which is why they're such assholes about gambling, they print money no matter what, guys. This is not about trying to get Duke into the Final Four for TNT ratings. This is not about trying to put like Connor McDavid against like the New York Rangers in the Stanley Cup final to try to, gin up interest in a sport that is like 5th in the country right now. It's not about Boston and the Lakers in the NBA finals. Like, have there been officials individually that have been corrupt? I'm sure there's more than just the one that called the Lakers series, poorly in 2003. I'm sure. But to suggest that the league is going to make less money because the Titans win a game is absolutely insane to me. It's insane that the league is going to print the exact same amount of money it does every single year, whether the Vikings win that game or not, guys. Yeah. That part's insane to me.
I said last week, league likes an upset here and there. Titans beating the Vikings would have been a headline story yesterday behind the Bills beating the Chiefs, I bet.
Yeah. I mean, one of them for sure.
Ed says it's all payback for the Music City Miracle. No flag. So, that could be things evening out in the universe, if you will.
Cody says, why isn't that hit reviewable? Which is a good question. I think there's plenty of calls that are not reviewable because of the subjectivity of the call, right?
It's just not in the envelope of things that go to replay, and the booth can only chirp down on things that are in the envelope of things that go to replay. Now, if the guy had caught it, and they called it, it's a scoring play and it's eligible to be replayed.
But let me ask you this though. Don't they check for targeting?
Targeting, if I'm not mistaken, targeting is not an NFL thing. Launching is an NFL thing. Targeting is a college thing.
Okay. That sounds right. Ed says, if I told you next year's starting quarterbacks were Brownlee, Baker, and McCreary, what would you do? I'm not sure. Or would you hate it?
Would I hate it? I'd hate it for the money that they're swallowing on L'Jarius Sneed. He's got a big cap number next year. I'm certain. I don't know about Awuzi's finances, but I don't think you can make that jump. And I think those guys are pretty good, but I think if you've got a healthy Sneed and a healthy Awuzi, it's better.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, so we have a good question here. I wanted to get to Austin's question before we kind of transition out of this topic, which is from preseason until now. Have your thoughts changed on the team's identity? If so, how? And do you think that Brian Callahan has been able to show it on tape enough to show that he knows what he wants to do? Complicated question there, Paul, from Austin.
Well, I think the identity has changed and or been established more. It's the same as it's been in the past. Run heavy, play action if you can, play defense. I don't think that's what anybody was looking for. I mean, maybe Callahan would take whatever he could get, and that's what they've become. That's what they're good at, and so they play to what they're good at. They didn't run worth a damn yesterday, but mostly they're Tony Pollard and the defense. If they could play decent special teams and not hand over field possession constantly, they can contend at least for a while. But I don't think that's what they intended to be at the start.
Is it fair? And this is because we're gonna talk about Levis, so I wanted to. I think one of the things this is kind of gonna be complimentary to Brian Callahan and negative to Levis, but that's not necessarily what I mean. I think it's clear that Levis he will never, even at his best, necessarily be the quick trigger, accurate processing guy that I think Callahan wants to run his like quick, shorter, more intermediate passing game. I think you can see how he designs plays and how he puts players into routes that he kind of likes things, right? And it doesn't feel like Levis, as I'm watching Burrow last night, go up and down the field in the second half against the Chargers. It doesn't feel like Callahan wants those things and that Levis can do those things well, even if he does figure it out. It doesn't mean they won't have a good relationship or be able to score points or figure it out. It does feel like they want to be more of a balanced team with versatile options that can play kind of positionless football, which is the way Chase Brown and those other guys are used with Burrow. And it feels like that is what he wants to be. And I don't know. Do you agree with that on the first point here? Do you think that would be, if he had his choice, he would have more of a system like that? Or am I just making assumptions?
Maybe. I don't think we have enough evidence to really know, which is a sad place to be, but which is where their insufficiencies leave them. And I think Levis also being bad intermediate kind of leaves you in a weird spot where you kind of have a hole, from here to here that if my screen north to south is a football field, and you've got a hole there, it kind of leaves you in an awkward spot as well. I don't know if we've seen the meld of kind of what he wants to do and what Levis is good at happen yet. And maybe it's starting to happen. The last 2 weeks have been much better offensive football, despite the fact that the points haven't been there and that they've not really felt like they were going to win either of those two games, right?
Yeah. Very good defenses. Very good defenses.
Yeah. And yesterday, I mean, you can't take away the 98-yard touchdown, but a third of the offense is the 98-yard touchdown, which the defense really botched. I don't know what the safety's doing on that play, but I felt like, and maybe we're extending into the next topic here, Levis yesterday to me felt like he was making some throws, some of those throws. And I wrote early this year, maybe after 3 or 4 games, where are the wild throws that we saw last year? Well, there they were yesterday. The 98-yard throw was a great throw. The The throw to Ridley that was called back for the touchdown was a great throw. The throw to Bryce Oliver over the middle. He
Great
was
throw.
on his back foot with somebody in his face, and we saw the arm and the wrist flick work their magic, and we had not seen those throws. The NWI throw, not on the 98-yard. I think that was another play that was called back. 95 yards, by the way, of penalties. Cost 80 yards of offense plus the 15 yards of penalties on the Isaiah Prince 3 calls. I mean, that gets Levis to 350, 370.
Yep.
But I thought that it was a substantially good game for Levis in terms of those throws. Now, that didn't translate to points or great stats, points being the most important one. So that's disheartening. But there was something different about Levis in this game that seemed like he built off the last game. And maybe this next game, I wouldn't put it past the Titans to spring a divisional upset against Houston, especially if he builds on what he's been doing. But they got to find a way to make it into points.
Yep, I agree. 17 of 31, 295, 9.5 yards per attempt, which is even better than it was last week at 7.6. Had the interception late, but I'm not even going to really count that into the conversation. I do think what I thought I saw against the Chargers was the game slowing down, him being a little bit more comfortable inside of the offense and processing appropriately. I think I saw that again. I think almost too much that it slowed down for him, because there were certainly times where he should have gotten rid of the football. Certainly the fourth down call.
What do you
got to throw it.
Got
5 sacks, though, and 7 sacks last week for 12 over the last 2 games, where he's played his best, which I think is a compliment to his game. If you are also running for your life in the process of developing into your 2 best offensive games. Just for a note here, 28 sacks taken last year for Will Levis, 27 this year. That's 16 games, 55 sacks. That is 3.4 sacks per game that Will Levis has faced for his entire NFL career so far to date. Here's the thing. Here's the throw I want to point out, and I can't remember who caught it. I think it was Ridley, maybe. It was about an 18-yard curl. And when I think of the big arm that Will Levis has, I think it's easy to think about accuracy down the field, deep shots, stretch the field, make them think about it. Maybe those 2 high safeties got to stay back a little bit, opening up for a short game and Pollard. The throw that, I don't know if you remember the throw, they were going right to left from south to north, and I think it was the second quarter, and it was right about midfield, and he drops back, lands on his back foot I think it was a 5-step drop maybe, in the drop, on time, plant, fires it on a rope, about 18 yards, right into his chest. Receiver catches it, hits the ground, tag down. It's like an 18 or 19-yard gain. And that is the throw. And the other one that I like to see are the throws that Matt Stafford makes, which is not, we know you can air it out. We know you can do that. And we know you can check it down. And when the system calls for it, you got to be accurate around the line of scrimmage. But the throw that makes Matt Stafford special is the opposite hash 15-yard deep out. That is the throw that makes his arm different. And what Levis needs to show people is, how does the big arm affect you in that intermediate game? It's the 18-yard curl where I can put it between 2 defenders before they close the gap, before they close the window. The 15-yard out route on the opposite hash, where Ridley is very good along the sidelines. He is very good on the sidelines. Those are the throws where the big arm has to connect with the intermediate passing game to be effective, because not many guys could make that throw that he made yesterday in that game, where he drives the ball on a rope 6 feet off the ground, 18 or 20 yards down the field. It was an impressive throw, and you just don't see that throw enough from Will Levis. But I saw it yesterday at least once. So,
which makes you wonder, where's it been? Why haven't we seen it? How much of it is him being gun shy? How much of it is the system limiting him? Why are we at week 11 and just seeing these throws? And I think that's a really good question that I'll certainly ask him on Wednesday. I don't know what the answer is going to be, but I was upset last week when he was still talking about, checking boxes of getting things under their belt. Well, maybe it's taken this long. I don't know. It shouldn't.
We've alluded to the moral victories kind of tongue in cheek. But you have mentioned there are some things that look like building under the surface or behind the scenes or more, whatever.
Callahan said that
Callahan's been talking about, and we've seen some of it. What are the other things? I'm excited. This is going to sound weird because I feel bad for Jack Gibbens having to deal with that and playing as hard as he does. And, I think he gets a little too much flack, maybe even from me and some other people. But The idea that Baker played 61 snaps yesterday, that you could see some of Williams or Gray now that Gibbons is out. I think there's some reason for fans to be like, oh, at least, there's nothing to lose here. Let's see some of what these guys can do. What else do you take away from this game? And maybe it's a 2-game window that says, all right, I'm seeing actual growth from the team itself.
Well, there's more consistency from Ridley still. Wasn't a great numbers game, but took away a 51-yard touchdown from him on a penalty, right? So that would have put him in a very good range again statistically. Seems like he's turned into something like what you expected him to be for $50 million guaranteed. Especially on a day where Pollard and Spears were zeros, right?
Yep.
Bryce Oliver, I thought, I was a Bryce Oliver skeptic coming in because Bryce Oliver, what he did in the preseason was almost exclusively against third stringers, but he's doing some things against, legitimate competition. That was a good catch, good route yesterday. I'm not that excited about the inside linebackers. I think Williams is exceptionally raw, and I think Gray, is learning on the fly, and he didn't really have much camp. And I don't see what's wrong with Murray. I mean, I see what's wrong with Murray, but as your starting guy, Murray and Baker, who they courted in free agency, and then, look, say what you will about Gibbons. I don't want him hurt by any means. First half yesterday, he played. Gibbons only played 6 snaps. They apparently awoke and said, "Hey, Baker can potentially give us more in this matchup than Jack Gibbons." And so I'm fine if Murray and Baker are getting the lion's share of inside linebacker snaps. Somebody asked us about the other Baker, Darrell Baker and Brownlee, who I think have gotten a good share of experience here. It'd be hard to sit Brownlee. Awuzie back, if not this week, next week.
Yeah.
Callahan said Snead already out this week. Sounds like ridiculously long period out. But I still think, even with those young guys, if and when you have a chance to get Snead and Awuzie together as your starting corners, you got to go back to that and see what it looks like and see about your investment for beyond this year. Cheeto might have been a 1-year contract. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Well, I think there might be an out after this year, but I have to double check. It was more than one, but there might be an out. I'll double check that.
So, Mike Keith said during the broadcast when he had a chance to mention Jalen Harrell's name, like Jalen Harrell beginning to show some things. Jalen Harrell, according to game day statisticians, was in on 1 tackle. Have you seen Jalen Harrell? Have you noticed Jalen Harrell? I mean, that's the Pravda part of Mike Keith sneaking into the game calling part of Mike Keith, which I like to keep the two divided. I like to hope the two stay divided. Jalen Harrell's not done a damn thing. Has he? Am I wrong?
No.
So
no, I think he's like a good rotational scout team-ish call-up player that probably is in the league a while because he's a smart kid who really works hard. You know what I mean?
But what he's going to do starts happening next year. It's not happening now.
Yeah, no, I agree. Ed says, isn't Levis, if he stays on this recent trajectory, a better option than starting over at the position, use the picks on edge and tackle and fix other needs? That is ultimately the $5 million question.
$1 million question. That's right. Even if he, back, several weeks ago, I'm not a big proponent of using a high draft pick on a quarterback necessarily. They don't have a third. They've got 3 other major needs. We know edge rusher, which I rank high. An electric wide receiver who's young, and right tackle, which I don't want to see in the first round, but they don't have a 3rd rounder, and I think they need to do some manipulating to get some more draft picks. If they're drafting 3rd, which I think is where they are now, I don't know. I didn't look at Tankathon after this game, but I would like to see him trade back and gather stuff. I'm not wild about the quarterback situation. I was saying even before Levis has taken this uptick in the last 2 weeks, I would go for a situation where he's in the mix with another veteran who's better than Mason Rudolph, maybe in a competition situation. But if Levis goes from where he was against Cincinnati in week 1 to where he is now, and he can make a similar gain in the next 7 games from where he is now to the January 8th game or whatever it is, could be in a decent position to give you some renewed hope that in a competitive situation, maybe he could emerge as something, and that they don't have to chase. I don't want them to chase.
Right. You can make your team definitively better if you, and I think it actually sets up well. If your 3 biggest needs are edge rusher, wide receiver, and offensive line right tackle, if you can get a 3rd-round pick, you go edge in the top 10, you go wide receiver in the first 10 of the 2nd round, which is where a lot of really successful receivers are drafted in the NFL, and you take a quality right tackle that you think can compete for that spot in the 3rd round. That is actually a really good strategy, because you know what that does? No matter who you have at quarterback in the following 3 years, it makes the rest of your team better no matter what. No matter who's playing quarterback.
And maybe that 3rd pick we're talking about isn't a 3rd rounder. Maybe if you're trading out of 3, it's a 2nd rounder. Maybe it's a 3rd rounder plus a next year's 1st round. Who knows? You know, if somebody's in love with a quarterback, there's a quarterback tax. But if you're dropping from 3 to 10, we'll have to go back and look at the price.
You're getting a lot.
That's a costly price. That gets you a lot.
Yeah. So I'm not. I think the right way to say it is that if there is as much growth in the last 2 weeks from Will Levis, prorated over the next 7 or 8 games, then what I think you have earned is the right to compete for the starting spot next year. He's still on he's still on a cheap contract, and you still need to get better at other places. And none of this stuff happens in a vacuum. We've already talked about this at the quarterback position in the draft. I think there are a lot of interesting options, none who are top 5 bona fide start right away guys. I think there are a lot of guys that are going to go in the 10 to 20 range. And they're going to be sort of evaluated like J.J. McCarthy or Bo Nix or Michael Penix. They're going to be kind of evaluated like those guys. None of them are going to be evaluated like Arch Manning is going to be number 1 the following year. So unless you know for sure about one of these guys, and I don't know how anyone could, Garrett Nussmeier, Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, there's some nice options, but none of them are like top 5 good. They're all 10 to 20. And maybe that's a reason you take one, because you're not paying a premium for them. Maybe.
Well, the thing is, in a vacuum, I mean, even if you're saying Sanders and Ward are more like 10 and 12 in a vacuum,
which they're not.
Don't they become 1 and 3?
I don't think so.
Almost always do.
I see what you're saying.
Quarterback needy teams.
I see what you're saying. So I've got a question about that, and coming up in just a second. Any other things from the good, from the positive that you are like, yeah, I think there were things to take away? Just anything else you want to add? I just want to make sure we empty the notebook on that.
NWI continuing to do things. I mean, that's 5 and 6 games. Goes down in the history books. The longest touchdown reception, longest reception in franchise history. He's tied for it now, and the previous one came in 1962, 3rd year of franchise existence.
Longest completed pass in Titans history.
Just fantastic work by him, who continues to establish himself as somebody said, take down the promotional materials about the new stadium and put NWI on it. I think that's a little bit of a shot at Jeff. Jeff's been better. And I think you could give some of that credit to T'Vondre Sweat, who's drawing people, but T'Vondre Sweat's impact in the past game.
Callahan very positive about T'Vondre Sweat today. Very positive.
I mean, he had 2 plays where he missed a sack and he lined up offsides back to back. Those are not positive impact plays.
I wish any of them could have finished a sack on Sam Darnold, because they made Sam Darnold.
How is Sam Darnold so slippery?
Escapability was wild yesterday. Quickly on Simmons, I did write this down on his comments after the game. He said he was talking about how the team is cursed. He was talking about the officials, and he basically said, and this is not a Simmons thing, this is like a lot of players, like, well, that's out of our control. We can't worry about it. And I realized that, like, once a call goes to like review, it's in New York. It's literally out of the control of the building. But if your football team has 13 penalties for 90 yards, that is literally you not being disciplined enough, and it is something you can control. So that part rubbed me the wrong way, but it wasn't like an anti-Simmons take. It's sort of like an messaging strategy that players have. Oh, it's out of our controls. The officials are going to do what they're going to do. I get that, but also line up on the line of scrimmage properly. You know
here's the better take, and major support for the left side of the offensive line, where Latham said, don't think we lost this game because of the officials. We didn't. And where Kuharsky said, this game was about what we did wrong, not about the calls. We got to put ourselves not in position to be called for stuff.
Braden,
that's what we got to do.
You didn't watch the game, did you? I was in the building, and Peter Skoronski and J.C. Latham agree with me. Don't make excuses by losing football games and allow the refs to even be a factor. Go out and win the game.
Allow for the possibility that if your team's called for 13 and the other team is called for 3, that your team, which is clearly worse, commits fouls because it's not as good and needs to commit fouls.
The Titans are not as good as the Vikings?
Correct.
What? All right, here's my questions. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, Sinkers Beverages, go support good local businesses, all of whom are run by folks in the community who live and operate and work in the community. Go sign them up. Listen, Braden, I'm not going to continue to belabor the point about Isaiah Prince. He was not lined up correctly. When the official tells you you're not lined up correctly at the beginning of the game, and then you get called twice for it, it doesn't matter what you think. The official has told you to change your behavior. It was like talking to my 8-year-old. Like, I've told you 3 times to stop hitting your sister. You've hit your sister, even if it didn't hurt her, and she was laughing.
Now go to your room.
You broke the rules. So there you go. All right, here's my question, and I've heard you talk about this a lot. And this is almost like an academic argument, just because I think it's going to be interesting to discuss rather than I feel strongly in agreement or disagreement with you. And it's tied into Levis and the atmosphere and the crowd and the new stadium that you've already mentioned and all this stuff. You have said repeatedly that you don't want the circus that would come with Shedeur Sanders and maybe his father, Dion, should they be in the market for a quarterback. We've already discussed that maybe they're not in the market for a quarterback. I want to have an academic discussion about this for just a few minutes here to wrap up the show, which is, and this was posited by one of my co-hosts on another show who's a diehard Titan season ticket holder, but works in news and politics. He's not a media member in sports, but he's a huge Titans fan. And he goes, Braden, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he's like, man, you know, Paul's always talking about how he doesn't want the circus and he doesn't want the circus, but I could think of an owner who would want a little attention on her franchise the way some teams get attention in other ways, Dallas Cowboys, Packers, Jets, etc. And I could see the argument for just a second that while I do not approve of Deion Sanders' behavior at Jackson State and how he sort of has misled young people throughout his career, I do not really have a problem with his personality being big or, you know, the swag on the sidelines. Like, it's a game. It's entertainment. It's supposed to be fun. And it has certainly made a shit ton of money for Colorado as an institution. Now, I know the NFL is different, but could you not argue that if he is decent enough and good enough to be the starting quarterback, or at least get a shot at it, that this is an organization that needs that lightning rod sort of attention for once in its existence?
Oh, I could totally see that argument, and I understand it. And it definitely needs juice. My personal choice would be to get juice through really good football players who come without potential parental horror show. And I think Deion is an attention whore who's never going to quiet down. And the more you try to manage him as a coach, as a GM, the more difficult it'll become if his kid's having multiple tough Sundays in a row, and he's not going to be able to control himself. And even that is going to draw attention. It's going to be the lead item on PTI. It's going to draw columnists and TV crews to Nashville, and in a way that will be healthy for the organization in terms of drawing attention and eyeballs and even selling tickets. I don't disagree with that at all. I just don't think it's healthy for an organization that's largely perceived as dysfunctional to rely on something that's potentially dysfunctional to cure an element of its dysfunction. And so that's where I'm wary. It's potentially Pac-Man Jones without the violence.
Man,
okay. a very good, maybe that's overstating a bit, but a very good electric player, but who has a lot of stuff off the field that is a constant discussion point.
Well, okay, let me ask you this. So I don't think you're wrong about any of that. But Shedeur Sanders, as a player, there hasn't been a lot of off-the-field stuff around him personally. It's off the field around his father, for sure. Now, let me ask. So here's my question. Your college head coach being kind of the star of most college towns. The college coach has the most power. They actually have access to, like, police departments, unfortunately. Like, college coaches have way too much control and power over what happens in their little fiefdom, right? They're little dictators of their little, feudal plantation thingies. I'm curious about the NFL. Like, if Deion's still coaching at Colorado or at a power school or something, how could he even in the NFL? Don't the rules like keep him, like, unless he's an assistant coach or somebody were to hire him, isn't the locker room way more insulated than a college locker room, especially one with your dad?
Let me say, by the way, all indications are Shedeur is a good kid, right?
Yeah.
I think his dad can be an exceptional noisemaker. Sure, your New Year's Eve, horns and all of that. I mean, isn't it completely reasonable? Now, he's saying that this stopping teams from drafting his son will happen behind the scenes and all of that. My concern would be that when he gets frustrated, he's not going to be behind the scenes. And so he's at a press conference for Colorado and he's asked about him. Is he going to be able to not talk about him on a regular basis? Is he not going to tweet about him? Is he not going to, make a joke on the Aflac's commercial set about him? All of these. So he's at the Hall of Fame ceremony and he's asked about. There are plenty of points of access to Deion Sanders to talk about things other than Colorado football. And that's where I think it would become a thing. If the Titans, this could be the thing for Rand Carthon to determine his career on. And if he thinks he's a good quarterback, look, he's missed a relationship, right? And can he win Deion over and be the guy that keeps Deion calm and quiet and convinces him that this is the place for him? Well, I think not either. So
look,
that's my concern.
When you can wake up one morning and are good enough to play in an NFL football game for lunch and then good enough to play in a Major League Baseball game for dinner, you are not told no very often. Just in general. Like, you're just not told no. And Deion is not like, he's not like a former player. He's not black. He's not white. He's just Deion. He is one of one who is in his own category of person and talent, frankly. And look at Colorado. They're a couple of wins away from being in the Big 12 championship game, way ahead of schedule, and potentially playing for a spot in the playoff. But the attention that team got last year was even greater than it was this year. And I kind of agree with Jason on this. And again, I'm not sure where I fall on Shedeur Sanders, the talent, the football player. But I've come around on the idea, and Jason says, if I were a reporter for this team, I'd be begging for a circus rather than the weekly vigil. I am of agreement that even if it's a 3-year experiment, just like you're running through a 3-year experiment, I guess, with Will Levis, or maybe 2 years, that the experiment being run with lots of interest in your team is of benefit to the franchise and to the city and to the football fans and to the market. And it means you're going to get more coverage, more conversation, more positive coverage, more negative coverage, you're going to get more everything. And more interesting, more entertainment value. Like I could make the argument for Shedeur if you think he is the right player at pick number 3 to 8 or whatever.
And I'll listen to that. I hope I've kind of clarified where I am on that. But also, like, they can't control if they're in position for Arch Manning. But if you have a choice, like the circus, there's a circus that'll come with Arch Manning. That's the kind of circus Amy Adams Strunk would much rather set up 3 rings for than Shedeur.
It would be the
Samuel,
Caleb Williams circus around for the Bears this season, right? Is a little bit more what you're looking for.
Yeah, and they've butchered Caleb Williams with bad coaching and bad environs, but the kid can play, right?
Yeah.
If the Titans could somehow wind up attached to a Manning, that would be, an absolute ideal scenario for them. Now you can't manipulate your way there.
Look, the way folks talk about Will Levis, just start him next year and you'll have an opportunity to pick number 1 overall. I'm not saying that.
Too long to play.
About.
It's too long to play, too many variables.
But if they're
not going to lose on purpose.
But no, of course not. But if it fits into what we've already said, which is the smarter strategy is to make the rest of your team better and allow Will the opportunity because he's earned himself another chance maybe at next year. And if it's real bad and doesn't go well, guess what your consolation prize is? A better quarterback class next year, right? Like these are all not necessarily bad ideas. So I just wanted to pick your brain on that because I do think there is some value in having a lightning rod piece of attention for for an organization that is constantly starved and fans are constantly complaining about not getting enough attention. I think that it's not all negative. It's not all negative.
No, it wouldn't be all negative with Shedeur, but it'd certainly be better if it was Arch.
Well, no question. If my aunt had balls, she'd be my uncle. So there you go. All right, paulkuharsky.com, of course. You can get to him there. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, but Sinkers Beverages as well. 4-time liquor store of the year covering East Nashville. Their sister store, Bluegrass Beverages, obviously taking care of you guys up in Hendersonville. Over 50 years of service to that community, also award-winning, so make sure you go sign up for the in-crowd. I don't need to tell bourbon folks, but this is allocation season. And Sinkers Beverages, if you are signed up for the in-crowd, you will get access to cool shit. I'm just telling you. It's right here in the copy, Paul. It says access to cool shit. It says it right there in the words.
Don't hesitate. Allocate.
There you go. And line up on the line of scrimmage if you're an offensive tackle. I don't understand. What's hard to do about that. Hard to do about that. All right. Thank you for hanging out, PK. Thank you for all the fans hanging out and listening. And if you're on YouTube, thumbs up, notifications on, all that good stuff. We appreciate you guys being involved in the product. Make sure you check out paulkuharsky.com. And if you are listening on a podcast app, write reviews. It does matter to us. We do appreciate that. 5 stars only, of course. If you do not give us 5 stars, you are a hater. Paul, good to see you, man.
Likewise, don't block the box. See you.
There you go. All right, guys. Talk to you guys later.